Hello, everybody. Welcome to Little Rusty Bucket. Subscribe to the channel, drop a like, and if you want to join today's Discord hot takes, if you would like to participate in these videos every week, go ahead and click the link down below to join our Patreon to join the Discord and get your hot take reacted to, basically guaranteed, so long as it is worded properly. But we got this take from Torch. Bill Russell influenced and changed what it means to be a winner with his unparalleled ability to just win, both as a player and a coach, first black coach in U.S. sports, and influenced Magic Johnson, as well as how he influences athletes into speaking out about injustice like Kareem and LeBron, how he influenced the resilience that an athlete should have. Bill Russell not only changed the game, but he changed the culture surrounding it. He changed what it meant to be great, both as a player and a person. Rest in peace, Bill Russell. Well, that is very nice. Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with anything that you said here. When you're that early into the game, it's weird to even say you changed the game. He kind of made the game. He was a huge part in the evolution of it because, first of all, he moved way too fast for somebody his size. He was a damn track star when he was in college and high school, I believe. And that was weird. But then also, he invented the fast break and blocking shots. I don't know why people didn't think to block shots before this. That's what's always weird to me about that story. But everything that I have read indicates that Bill Russell, people were like, oh, you can do that? That's crazy. And then also, because he was such a good passer as a center, he would block the shot, grab the ball, and he'd be great at throwing like a damn near full court pass, or like because he was quick and his handle was actually decent, he would take the ball up the court himself. Like, dude was actually revolutionary in so many ways. And like, not only did he change the game, like he foundationally changed the game in so many facets. And the culture surrounding it, especially, like, obviously the times in which he was playing called for such challenging voices and stuff like that to come up. Like, it was a very tumultuous time. Kind of laid the groundwork into this idea of like, no, I'm not gonna just shut up and dribble. I'm not just going to be the basketball player you want to be and then pretend not to be the black man that I am. And that's super commendable. And I think his courage is what led to the courage of so many other civil rights leaders throughout sports history. So yeah, shout out to Bill Russell, R.I.P. Okay, so Briscoe, APAB, Palestine Flag Chicago, made a post that I was following before in the last one, and that kind of derailed at the end. Apparently, they have reworded it, so we shall see now. The only people who should really ever be rated over Hakeem Olajuwon in the debate of the greatest center of all time are Kareem and Shaq. It's not the fault of Wilt and Bill Russell that they played in the era they did, but it doesn't take away how much less of a crapshoot it was winning a championship then in the 50s and 60s than it is now in the 80s, where Kareem won most of his anyways. And lastly, the NBA in the era of Bill and Wilt was in a state for a team like the Celtics and a mastermind like Red Auerbach to be in a position to dominate in a way that can only be compared to the New York Yankees, who also dominated a sport that was in a state to be taken advantage of like they did. And it goes without saying that the 80s, the talent in the NBA collectively, especially post-merger with the ABA, has risen higher than it was in the 50s and 60s. Well, if you were going to ask me if I had to pick three candidates to label as the greatest center of all time, I, too, would go with Hakeem Olajuwon, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and Shaquille O'Neal. I think that Kareem has the longevity argument, Shaq has the absolute peak argument, and then Hakeem is kind of in the middle there. I don't think Hakeem's peak, like, years-wise, was dramatically longer than Shaq's was, maybe a year or two, but, like, I do think Shaq peaked higher. I do think that Hakeem peaked higher than Kareem, though, only by a slim margin, mind you, but even still, I do feel that way. But yeah, I'm with you on that one, and it's not even necessarily the era they played in thing. I just also think Wilt and Bill were worse players, and that is partially the context of the era they were in. But Bill Russell, not a scorer. Like, I think 15 points per game for his career, very poor efficiency, especially for a big man, even relative to his era. Bill Russell was a player, and again, this is kind of the context of his era that works against him, but they didn't really know what to do with him when he got there, so they were just like, okay, you're going to score the ball all the time. That's your job. You're wilt, you score. So I just think they were held back by their era in that way, but also Bill Russell was propped up with the ability to win. So I get why the era comes into context a lot, but I also just think drop them in, or, take the logic of like have them be raised from the year 2000 and get drafted in 2021. I do not think that Wilt or Bill would be better than Hakeem, Shaq, and Kareem, but I don't know. Once you're robbing them of all of the background information, it gets kind of weird there. I'm with you though. I would never answer anyone besides for Hakeem, Kareem, and Shaq. And I pretty much answer Hakeem as the greatest overall peak, but his was longer than Shaq's peak. Like the peak Shaq was better, but just peak Hakeem was better, and then Kareem has the longevity. I think I've overexplained at this point. Hopefully you get that. From D-Lo's Strongest Soldier, writing off of Adra's post, but best player for every decade. 2020's Jokic, Giannis, Tatum. Worst LaMelo. Oh, star players. Okay, I thought, yeah, it was just like worst play, period. 2020's star player LaMelo is the worst. I don't know. The problem is it's hard, like when you're getting into the weeds of like who is or isn't a star. For the rest of this, I think we won't have much issue, but yeah, that one's weird. Steph, KD, LeBron. Worst is Kemba, I guess. I feel like you're kind of knocking him for being on the Hornets in that case, or the Bobcats for most of it. But best players, Steph, KD, LeBron. Yeah, that's a pretty damn easy one. 2000s, LeBron, Kobe, Duncan. Again, I'm going to have to agree with you on that one. Elton Brand as the worst star. I feel like you're knocking him for only having like a 2-year peak. But I don't know. I think that's a little reductive. I don't know that Elton Brand was the worst star of the 2000s. He, from his rookie year to his last year on the Clippers, other than the 8 games he played before getting traded, he averaged 20 points per game for 600 games in a row, and he averaged 20 right out of the gate the moment he entered the league. So I think that's a little unfair. He also led the Clippers to their first playoff appearance since I think they made it in like the 90s at one point. But yeah, I don't know if Elton Brand's a good pick. MJ, Hakeem, Shaq. Yeah, that one's pretty obvious. Worst, Adrian Dantley. Didn't Dantley do most of his damage in the 80s? Yeah, dude, Adrian Dantley played 1 season in the 90s. You got your years wrong, bro. So that one's a no on that one for sure. 80s, Magic, Bird, Kareem. Yeah, pretty easy there. Reggie Theus is the worst star of that era. I'll be honest, I'm not very well versed in Reggie Theus. I do remember him because he was an all-star on the Chicago Bulls before they drafted Michael Jordan. And actually, yeah, they traded him midway through the season that he got there because I guess he got some kind of injury and just fell the fuck off. But I mean, I don't really think I don't like labeling worst stars because it's like I don't know who the fuck out of the 80s to go dig through for who the worst star is. So I don't think Reggie Theus deserves the smoke. He had a career altering injury and then wasn't quite as good at that point. But even still, like he's 18-6 for his career. Leave Reggie Theus alone. Yeah, 70s Kareem, Walt Frazier, or Clyde Frazier, and Dr. J. Do we go Clyde Frazier or Bill Walton? I guess Clyde lasted longer. Yeah, that's a fair third, I guess. The 70s are a weird era to pick. Also, if we're doing just NBA players, Dr. J doesn't actually qualify in this. Obviously, he was fucking crushing it in the ABA. He won 3 MVPs in a row there, but he was 25 and then jumped to this NBA and then immediately jumped from 29 points per game to 21. So like clearly worse in the NBA. So I don't know if Dr. J is the answer there. I think I would go with Bill Walton, but I get where you're coming from, at least in terms of like a guy playing in his peak. But then also, he got his only MVP in the NBA in the 80-81 season. So yeah, I don't think he would be the best pick there. And then 60s, Wilt, Bill, and Oscar. That one's pretty clear. Dave DeBuscher. I always read that name as Dave DeBussy. I can't. It's not my fault, all right? It just pops into my head. 60s, he was an all-star 3 times. His numbers are pretty good. I'm not really good with the worst ones, especially towards the bottom, because like I don't think Kemba was the worst star of the 2010s, because there's probably dudes who were a star for like 1 year and that was it. The worst stuff, hard to say. Best player every year or every decade, though, I think you pretty much nailed that, except for Dr. J in the 70s. And except for, actually, that was it. That was right. All right, you nailed it. From Conscious Feeling, the Nuggets are going to be a top seed in the West next year, and the only team with over 60 wins. The Nuggets, when healthy, always perform well, regular season win-wise, and they are deep as they have ever been with Jokic. I think the championship hangover is real for the Thunder, and the West is just overall a little bit more competitive than last year. I think the Thunder are a top 3 seed and win 50 plus, but I think the Nuggets take home the 1 seed this year. I don't know, because in the NBA now, it's like so pervasive to feel like your team's good enough, so you're like not pushing that hard to get a regular season record. I think what happened with the Warriors, that, you know, at least what Draymond proclaimed to happen, which is like, we tried so hard to win 73 games, we burned ourselves out at the end of the year. The teams are like kind of afraid to do that shit now. Part of me is like the Thunder are about to have literally this next take is reflective of that. I don't know if this is intentionally in response, but it's an hour later. But the Thunder could very well have a top 3 season of all time because they're basically in a similar situation to the Warriors. I agree with you on that front. I would not be surprised if they cross that 70 win threshold. I certainly think it would be very possible, but it's also like, are they going to attempt to do that? Are they really going to be all that interested in putting in the effort required to win 70 games? Or would you rather win 55, rest your key players for like the last 2 weeks of the season and comfortably still have a high seed in the Western Conference? I would also not be surprised if they went that route. So Nuggets 1 seed, Thunder also possibly. Like, yeah, I think those are probably the top 2 regardless. I like Houston a lot, but I don't know they're going to be as dominant in the regular season win column. I think both of these takes are fine. The Nuggets definitely could be the 1 seed. The Thunder could win 70 or they could coast. I really don't know. From D'Lo's biggest hater, the NBA's 2K26 cover is ass. More ass than D'Lo and his greatest soldier. Wow, that's some real hostility right there. Yeah, I mean, the cover was bad. Looks like it's AI as well because there's 2 Al Horfords if you pay attention to the blurry background Celtics. But yeah, the cover's terrible, but what else is fucking new? 2K bad? Yeah, the sky is blue. From Who Sorry, if a team lucks out and is able to acquire a superstar, best player on a championship team caliber, thank you for clarifying, they should go all out and do absolutely everything in their power to surround that player with a good team. I don't care if you need to go deep into the second apron or trade away the next 30 years worth of picks. If you get a true superstar, you do what you can to win. Players like that come around once in a lifetime, and for most teams in the NBA, and most teams aren't doing enough for those superstars. Yeah, I think this is a little different depending on what franchise you are. So you mentioned, like, for most franchises, it is true that to get a true superstar could be a once in a lifetime opportunity. However, for a top dog franchise, a Lakers, a Celtics, I don't know if you necessarily apply the same mentality where you're so short-sighted that you're like, yeah, I'll trade 30 first-round picks, whatever. But if you're the Charlotte Hornets and you drafted Victor Wembanyama, fucking go for it. Who gives a shit about 2050? You're the Hornets. An opportunity has descended down from heaven. Fucking take it. And that's the same way I felt about Anthony Davis when he was on the New Orleans Pelicans, although they got 3 superstars in a row, basically. Chris Paul, AD, then Zion. There is a certain way where you can push it too far, because like the Milwaukee Bucks have had this mentality of we're going to do absolutely everything in our power to surround that player with a good team. And it led them to where they are now, where again, they're doing everything in their power, but that power is becoming less and less and less and less as time goes on, because each and every time they make this big swing that's supposed to change everything for them, they end up depleting their assets. And then by the time you're on swing number 3, you're completely out of assets. So there's really not going to be a swing number 4. So when the situation's dire and pretty much over, you should be willing to concede when you know the inevitable is the inevitable. But yeah, a lot of teams are what especially bothers me is when they act like they have a super long timeline. Like, oh, we got this guy. He's great immediately. He's got his rookie deal, and then we can extend him beyond his rookie deal for another 4 years. So we have an 8-year window now that we have drafted this phenom to build a contender. But no, you have like a 6-year window tops. And even if you do have that time, it doesn't mean you should treat it like, we'll get to that team building stuff later on. We'll just see what we have now. To a certain extent, you should do that. But like, for example, what the Spurs did by trading for De'Aaron Fox, that's exactly how a franchise should operate. Like, yeah, we got Victor. We're doing this shit now. We're not waiting till year 5 to be like, all right, time to put a contender around Victor Wembanyama. Because I feel like that's the shit that the Cleveland Cavaliers more or less did. Not that LeBron constantly getting them in high playoff seedings helped their chance of building a team, but like they waited too long before they were like, okay, let's just make this panic Anton Jameson trade when it was too little too late. Like, there is a timeline that you gotta hit. You have to, not only for the sake of capitalizing on that player's peak, but also indicating to them that you are serious about building a contender around them. Because if you waste multiple years of their career while also reinforcing the idea that you're not even going to give them anything to look forward to, then they're going to leave. So yeah, great take from D'Lo's biggest hater. People hearing about not even watching a game, Caitlin Clark. I just feel like they think of her like she invented the wheel or bread or something. Her name power got like the WNBA equivalent of Braun or MJ aura-wise. She hasn't even done too much yet. Hopefully she will, but still. Also, D'Lo shouldn't be getting NBA contracts no more. He's a seller like he sold Nick Young out. Yeah, this guy is committed to the bit. I don't know the WNBA very well, but from what I understand, she hasn't exactly just been the GOAT right out of the gate. However, I also feel like it's good, more good than bad, that there is this casual over-assumption of her ability, because, like, at the very least, it's getting people to watch it more. Like, Caitlin Clark having that Braun or MJ-esque pull is good. That's, like, a very good thing for the WNBA. So, like, yeah, are there people who are going to overrate her subsequently as a result of that? Yes, but I think that's just the shit you take with the overall very good. Again, from D'Lo's biggest hater, Wemby won't be a consensus top 5 player in the league. That's reasonable. It's not like he's guaranteed to be consensus top 5. I don't think he reached consensus top 5 last year, but yeah. From Ethan Marquez, after finding out that Phil Jackson said that Kobe got a good amount of his defensive selections later in his career off of reputation more than actual skill, I don't see a good argument to why he should be above Stephen Curry all time. All Kobe had over Steph is a overhyped defensive ability and longevity. Steph Curry is a better scorer, better floor raiser, had a larger impact on the game, and was more loyal, though I don't care about this as much as people use it in an argument, and had a higher peak. I don't think loyalty is something that we need to bring up between two players who played for the same franchise their entire career. I recognize Kobe publicly demanded a trade, but, you know, he still stayed, so he gets the mulligan there. Just because Kobe had a good amount of defensive selections because it's kind of a popularity contest doesn't mean he wasn't still a league's better defensive player than Stephen Curry. I do think that Steph is the better offensive player. I think Steph is the greatest offensive player ever. It's either him or Nikola Jokic. But the defense is still very heavily skewed in Kobe's favor. I do agree, pretty much everyone agrees, that he got a couple of popularity contests, defensive first teams and second teams later in his career. But if you cut his defensive teams in half, he still has 6 more of them than Steph does. So, like, I don't think that's too big of a deal. From Torch, the dumbest thing the Sixers could do realistically is trade Joel Embiid. An Embiid trade completely shuts down all any chance of contention for a championship. I understand why it makes sense to trade Joel considering his history with injuries and the fact that he is above his 30s, but his trade value is at an all-time low. Worst case scenario, he's not his old self, but still a top 30 to 25 player in the league. Sorry, but that is not the worst case scenario and is still a serviceable player. Best case scenario, he's back to his old self while not an MVP candidate, still a 100% top 7 player in the league. Why not trade him? Because the Sixers do not have their picks for the next 2 years. While the core is young, excluding obviously JoJo and PG, wasting years on rebuilding without picks would be really stupid and could cause Tyrese Maxey to leave since he wants to win. I agree with what you're saying. The worst case scenario is not that he is still a top 30 to 25 player. The worst case scenario is that he doesn't play NBA basketball much at all anymore. So that, I think, at the same time, because that is the fear, I do not think that they should trade Joel Embiid, primarily just because his trade value is, as you highlight, at an all-time low. But there are far worse case scenarios than that. That's probably the worse than good, but still not the worst. Not the worst, just worse. Mind the versus the from Dr. Theo. San Antonio is already built for a deep playoff run in 2026. The Spurs going into next year have a full healthy season of Fox and Victor, potentially the duo Dame and Giannis were supposed to be. I think that's a stretch. A rookie of the year partner like Fox in the backcourt with Castle, or Fox in the backcourt with Castle. A strong enough playmaker in Fox to get Devin Vassell and Jeremy Sohan off ball where they're meant to be. Stretch bigs off of the bench with Olynyk and Cornette. Cornette cannot shoot. Don't give me that stretch big bullshit. And 2 lottery picks in Dylan Harper and Carter Bryant to develop with the young core throughout the year. Next to Denver, San Antonio is my dark horse to take out OKC in the second round to continue the trend of no back-to-back champions. Yeah, I'm doing a video on Rusty Buckets probably next week about the Spurs because I do not know where I'm at with them. Have they crossed the threshold to contention? I would think so, but there's a couple of questions to be answered there. I won't go into it too much, but I absolutely agree that it's in the cards for them to do that. From 46 years without an Eastern Conference Finals, the Wizards will be in the Eastern Conference Finals within the next 5 to 7 years. Even though Washington's core is still extremely young and inexperienced, I feel they are a few more moves away from contending in a very weak Eastern Conference with their massive amounts of cap space next year and absolute trove of draft picks, plus former OKC Thunder exec Will Dawkins at the helm. I think the Wizards are just a few moves away from a swing at the top of the East. I do think that the Wizards have a lot of interesting young pieces. I just don't have confidence in the franchise as it has historically been known to put those pieces together into anything substantial. Like from the Gilbert Arenas era to the John Wall era to the Bradley Beal era to the Alex Sarr, Bilal Coulibaly era. There is so many instances where the Wizards had a good amount of talent and then didn't do jack shit with it. So I'm going to have to disagree with you. I'm going to have to bet against that one. I just do not see it. I don't know if this is a hot take, but I don't think Ayton is even a top 30 big in the NBA, and Lakers fans are going to hate him, expecting way too much. In no order, Jokic, AD, Wemby, Kat, Embiid, Bam, Sabonis, Porzingis, Zubats, Chet, Şengün, Rudy Gobert, Jarrett Allen, John Collins, I guess, yeah. Isaiah Hartenstein, Miles Turner, Nikola Vucevic, Onyeka Okongwu, Jalen Duren, Walker Kessler, Derek Lively, Jakob Poeltl, Mark Williams, Rob Williams, Gafford, Mitchell Robinson, Nick Claxton, Ware, Klingon, Goga, and Edie. Naz Reid, yes. Okay. I'm going to nix a couple of names there. I think that he is better than, well, I don't think he's better than Porzingis, but like he'll be available. So that kind of doesn't count. I think there's an argument to be made. He's better than Rudy Gobert after the abysmal offensive playoffs that he had. I do think that he's on a similar tier to John Collins. You could argue he's a little bit better. Vucevic, DeAndre Ayton is better than Vucevic. I have no doubt in my mind about that. Derek Lively, I don't know. You can make a case there. He's a much more defensive oriented guy. Mark Williams, sure. Rob Williams, I don't know about that. I don't really know about that. He hasn't been healthy in quite a while. Daniel Gafford, I don't think Daniel Gafford is better. Mitchell Robinson, I don't think is better. Naz Reid is cool, but he's also not a fucking big man. Naz Reid is a small forward who plays power forward and sometimes center because it's 2025. Klingon, I'm going to say no for right now. Would he end up being better next year? Possibly, for sure. Goga Badatse, nah, I'll take Ayton over Goga. And Zach Edey, I also think I'd probably take Ayton over Edey, but again, this is a young guy category, so very, very, very well possible that's not the case this next year. But I do think DeAndre Ayton can be better than Zach Edey was in his rookie year, which is fine. I saw a couple people say that he's like a top 10 big. No. No, obviously no. Also, you didn't put Giannis in here. If you're going to put John Collins, that's a power forward. You can throw Giannis in there as well. But yeah, I agree that he's being overrated, but give me 37-year-old Brooke over Ayton. Yeah, that's crazy. That's just dumb. That's out of this world. From Grog695, the rise and overall dominance of Shaquille O'Neal is maybe the biggest factor in the temporary death of the center position. A lot of times when a generational talent comes along, the idea of what makes them great becomes what's fetishized. And in Shaq's case, after he had become the best player in the world mainly due to extreme outlier physical tools, there seemed to be a larger emphasis on extremely large human beings in regard to scouting NBA center talent. Hence, many centers coming into the league during that time were much further behind in regards to their feel for the game than they should have been. Yeah, that's kind of it's like a cyclical thing. Like originally, bigs were physical and finesse. And then Shaq was so physical. Like Richard Jefferson has his whole spiel about like, you would have to have like 3 centers on the roster just for fucking fouls. Yeah, like someone like Hasheem Thabeet. Hasheem Thabeet had no business being that type of pick, that high in the draft. But looking at where the league was not too far removed from the dominance of Shaq, I understand why they're like, yeah, let's just get this giant fucking dude who averages 1 million blocks in college to play. Like, I get where it comes from, but yeah, I mean, centers have gone far more in the finesse direction now. I think the lack of physicality gets overblown, but I think we saw the extreme of like, what if you only had physicality and that made the finesse stand out as good and important all the more? And then to the point where it actually ended up damn near overshadowing the importance of physicality. But yeah, that's a pretty good take. And last, we have a take from Rudy just now, which he was waiting to send until I was at the end of the video. Jacob, a.k.a. Rusty Buckets. I don't know why Buckets is in quotes. Not being an enjoyer of dunks is disqualifying at best and blasphemous at worst. He should hang it up. Well, it's also blasphemous to say I don't enjoy dunks. LeBron James famously said 2 points isn't always 2 points. Nothing controls momentum like sucking the air out of the arena with a poster. P.S. Ja Morant is the GOAT, or at least Gen Z Allen Iverson. I like dunks. I, however, have seen so many of them that I'm pretty desensitized. Like, at a certain point, if I see a thing enough times, I'm not as like, oh my God, when I see it happen. But I still do. Like, I'm still jumping out of my seat if a crazy poster happens. I still like dunks. Fuck you, Rudy. That's the end of the video.